Hello, good morning, welcome to Berkshire Guitar Amplifier Repairs. Stuart Smith here in Reading, England as always, and on the bench we have a Rivera 5512. Not an amplifier I'm familiar with, I don't very often get Riveras in. The issue with this amp is the customer's had it for many years, hasn't played it for 5 years, 10 years, decided to get it out, fire it up, and there's no sound. The amp is getting power, nothing coming out of the loudspeaker. Also a funny kind of smell, he says, which doesn't sound good. So I'm just going to take the chassis straight out, I think, and I have turned it on and confirmed there's no sound. I'm just going to take the chassis out and let's get cracking and have a look inside. See if we can get this amp back in the land of the living. Okay, I've got the chassis out and here we are, top side of the amp, mains transformer, output transformer, a couple of power valves. I think there's a 100 watt version of this amp, not totally sure. Anyway, this is the 50 watt or less version, and 5 preamp valves. I've had the amp on for a while and I've taken the covers off these. There's no sound coming out of it, and what I've noticed is that these valves here are completely cold. These are warm, getting a bit warmer, and these valves here are absolutely stone cold. So that tells me that there's no heater supply to these 3 valves. Now you might think, hang on, how come these are working? If these have got 6.3 volts heater, why haven't these? The answer is almost certainly, I'll have to check the schematic, but they have decided to feed the first 3 preamp valves with DC heater supply. I've seen that done many times, usually the first valve or maybe the first 2 valves, in this case the first 3 valves, and they feed it with DC, and the reason for that is it takes the hum off the heaters. They now don't have 6.3 volts AC on them, and that gets rid of hum in the very early stages of the amplifier. So we've got a problem here with a DC supply that feeds these heaters. So let's flip it over and see what's going on underneath. Here we are on the underside, and my immediate reaction is a bit of a yuck. It kind of reminds me of Mesa, really, with a very complicated printer circuit board, lots of these things which are kind of opto switches all over the place. They're just used to switch in gains and that type of thing when you press various buttons on the front. And like Mesa, have all these wires coming off the board, which makes doing anything on the board extremely difficult without taking and soldering everything in order to get the board out. So the other thing I've noticed is that I've turned the amp off now. We have 2 regulators here. I've had a look at them, plus and minus 18 volts. One of these heat sinks is absolutely red hot, and the other one after only like a minute being on. And this heatsink here is just a normal temperature. This is the 7818 18 volt regulator, and this is 7918 minus 18 volt regulator. So they're producing plus and minus 18 volts here. Not quite sure why. It might be something to do with those heaters. This regulator here is getting absolutely red hot. I've also had a little measure of the voltage, and it's only putting out a couple of volts, 2 volts. So basically either this regulator is faulty or something is dragging down the plus 18 volts. I've removed all of the preamp valves, and this is still getting hot and still only producing a couple of volts. So that's the situation we're in at the moment. I've had a quick look at the schematic, and as expected, here's what's going on. V1, V2, V3, 2 heaters in each envelope linked together, and they've just daisy chained all the heaters together like Christmas tree lights, taken one end to minus 18 volts and the other end to plus 18 volts. So if either of these 2 DC supplies are down, these heaters won't really work. So that's mystery solved. Now what I'm going to do is to just change on spec this 18 volt regulator. I don't want to get involved in a lot of diagnosis and fault finding. It may be something else is dragging it down, for example, as a capacitor on the output of it. I think it's one of these two. If they are short circuit, then that of course will short the output of the regulator too, and cause a problem. So I'll obviously check that. Now to get to this regulator is not, you know, very easy. I'm going to have to take these plugs out, probably undo several of these, take the knobs off the front and the nuts off. I don't know how many of these will have to come off, but it's a real typical Mesa layout this, where they make it extremely hard to get the PCB out. Anyway, let's have a go and see how we get on. Well, saying that about the capacitors gave me an idea, and I powered it up again, put my finger on this capacitor here, and it's absolutely red hot, too hot to touch. This one's okay. This is a capacitor, 100 microfarads, 25 volts, sitting on the output of the 7818 regulator. I believe it's short circuit, and that's what's pulling down the regulator, and that's what's making the capacitor get hot. Also, there's also a kind of funny smell of you know, burning capacitor coming as well. So that is the issue. Not surprising really. Look at the size of these capacitors, tiny little things, 100 microfarads they're supposed to be at 25 volts. Yeah, well, I'd expect that to be twice the size of that. So I think we might have a bit of what might be in luck here actually. If we can change that capacitor, this 7818 output will come up nicely, and we may get lucky and have a fix. So let's make a start now on trying to get this board out. I probably won't show you every small detail of this, but at the moment all the nuts have got to come off the front here. That's the first thing, nuts and washers. Again, this is my idea of an overcomplicated amplifier. I don't like overcomplicated amplifiers. My own personal view, and it is personal, is that an amplifier should just be fairly simple and do all the heavy lifting. That this one has lots of controls on almost every knob you pull. Treble, master, look, treble controls all switched, highly complicated. Each one of these requires circuitry in here to make it all happen. Anyway, we've got those off, so I'll probably take the board screws out next. Which of these connectors I need to take off in order just to be able to lift up the board so that I can just get to the underside here and replace both of those capacitors. Right, so we'll take some of these screws out. Oh, those are really in tight. God, crikey! They're the hardest screws I've ever taken out of a board. That was full strength on the end of a big screwdriver to even get that to shift. Like about it. Right, I think the next thing to do is to turn it the other way up and take all the valves out. Three preamp valves, and what's that? Unmarked cheap Chinese valve. A 12AX7. Okay. Pair of EL34s. So these will have to come off. God, dearie me. Sheesh, what are they doing with this amp? putting full torque on these and I can't shift them. How ridiculous. Well, actually, okay, well now I'll look at it actually. God, so many dry joints on here too. Bit of a piece of junk, this amp, if I'm honest. The more I look at it. Anyway, here are the power valves here, so I don't actually need to take those out. Right, now, what? Nothing's moving here at all. It doesn't even feel remotely. Ah, there's another screw in here. Oh, crikey. Again, full body weight behind that. Okay, that feels kind of loose-ish now, that board. Not that it's going anywhere for the moment. So I have a choice here of, I think I'll unsolder these connections here. Right. This needs to come out, you see. I don't know whether it's going to come easily out. Now I look at it. Yeah, I think we've got a bit of a problem here. In order to get this board out, it's going to have to come this way enough to clear these shafts here, which are quite long. Longer than the distance between here and here and here and here. And I don't think it's going to be able to, this board here is quite high up off the back. I don't think it's going to be able to tilt enough to get it out. I wonder if I could do a top side repair. A top side repair would involve me, I'm just thinking aloud here, just because I think it's probably quite useful for you to follow my thinking. Here's the capacitor we want to change, and I don't think we're going to get this board out very easily. Obviously we can take this board out, take this board out. I was unable to do the screws on this board despite my strongest efforts, so I guess it might be possible to take this board out and then we take this out. I'm just wondering if we got in there with a pair of cutters, and it's going to have to come out anyway, that C13. If we got in there with a pair of cutters and kind of graunched away at it, would we be able to get... No, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get down to any kind of solderable connections on there. Well, not making a lot of progress here. I've released this backboard here, but of course you can't take this board out because it's fouling up against this one, even if you... I think it'll come out. No, it won't come out above these heat sinks here. So this board doesn't come out here until this board's out. This board has somehow got to clear this board. Well, I think we're just going to have another go at getting these two boards out. I have had a look at this, and it's, I can chop that away, but I don't know that I'm going to expose two nice pads I can solder something else onto. It might be that I can work out where they go, but it's all quite awkward really. Right, I've taken the nuts off this one, so now that board can come out, look, with its shape-proof washers just falling all over the place. And now it's really a question of getting this one out. So these are the screws here. I've put all my weight behind them. Try once more. Absolute madness this, doing up screws. Well, that won't even go in there. I don't know what kind of... Well, that one's undone. That one's not undoing. That one's not undoing. Nope. Golly, how absolutely ridiculous. I've got one screw out there. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling my full body weight behind the screwdriver, and it's a funny sort of, it's not a standard posi drive head, that. Would you believe the idiots have put some sort of security screw in there? That's some kind of a star head security screw of some sort. Not even one I particularly recognise. Honestly, what is... I know I moan a bit, but what on earth goes through the minds of the people who design this kind of thing? I'd like to get them in a room and bang their heads together, I really would. Why would you put a rare security screw? No, I don't know what these are. Nope. No, I'm afraid I've drawn a blank on there. There's some bizarre, weird security screw. Well, I'm going to attempt to remove this capacitor from the top side. Okay, that's it removed, and when I smell it, that's the smell that I'm smelling when it gets hot. So 100% definitely that capacitor, but whether we can do anything here at all now, I'm not sure. Right, I've managed to get this capacitor out, and there are two kind of solder blobs there, but I can't solder onto them. So they're obviously part of the capacitor, which is not solderable somehow. Anyway, I'm going to leave those alone, and I'm going to pick up 18 volts here, plus 18 volts, that's the output of the regulator, and I'm going to pick up ground from here. So my idea is to put a 100 microfarad capacitor across those 2 points there, and see if we can get ourselves out of trouble. Of course, ideally we'd like to change this one as well, but I'm just not going to do that. Right, so the reason I'm not going to do that is because I think I got a bit lucky drilling this out and not causing some damage. Don't really want to risk doing the same thing again there. And if that goes at some time in the future, we'll have to do something similar. Right, so I'm going to put a 100 microfarad capacitor across there. There we go, there's the capacitor installed, from ground to plus 18, plus 18. So that should do the job. I'm now going to put all this back together and switch it on and see what happens. Okay, I've put the two back boards in. I'm now going to put the board screws back in. Not as tight as they did them, just don't need to be that tight at all. I'm going to advise the customer that he should maybe think about changing his amp and getting something, I don't know, a little bit more modern. This is it reminds me so much of a meter. It's a disaster waiting to happen, really. If anything now goes wrong on this board, my view is it's going to be very difficult to remove it. If I had to remove this board, if my life depended on it, then I would probably drill out those screws that are holding this valve board in, and tackle the problem that way. But you can see it's a right flipping mission getting just if any component goes wrong here, you're in for a heap of trouble. And in my view, this is very bad design. But of course, they don't really care that much about repairability when they design something. It's quite low on their priority list. It's other factors come in, usually like cost of build and all that sort of stuff. They don't really care if you can repair it or not. But this is a particularly egregious example of a difficult to repair amp. Right. So that's the board screws in. So now all I've got to do is put the nuts and bolts on the front here, and then we can do a test. I'm putting it all back together rather than testing it at this stage, because to be honest with you, if this doesn't work, I'm not doing any more work on the amp, because I don't think I can economically repair it. I've already spent way too much time, way more time than I will be. Right, the other thing that slightly bugs me is you have a sort of hand-built amp like this, quite expensive I would imagine, and yet they've put the cheapest rubbish Chinese valves in that they can get away with. This hasn't even got any markings on it. Again, I think that's just really poor. No markings on this valve. That was marked 12AX7, all Chinese stuff. Right, so now, moment of truth. I'm going to get some power on it, get a speaker in and power it up and see what happens, really. Okay, we're powered up. Doesn't sound terribly promising, I have to say. That's a pity. Oh, okay. Sounds sort of vaguely like something's happening. Okay, smoke coming out of it. Never a good sign. Interesting. Okay, well, a bit surprising that. The 7818 is still pulling a lot of current, that's still hot. That capacitor's cold, that's the 7918 capacitor. The new one I've put in is fine. And yet we had some smoke coming from. I wonder if that's that sort of gunk is still around there somewhere. Okay, the issue that we might not be able to fix is that when I turned it on, I could actually see glowing around this area here. So the board is kind of carbonized and is forming a short circuit basically. I can feel, you know, that carbon going pretty much all the way through the board. Now, whether we can do anything about that, I sort of doubt. I think we're into a situation where the capacitor there has burnt through the board, cause the board to carbonise and effectively causing a short circuit across the tracks. So that's not good. Turn it on again. Okay, well the glowing has stopped around that area, which is a bonus. Proof of the pudding is whether we have 18 volts on there on the output of that regulator, or whether we've still only got 2 or something. Let's have a look. Oh, we've got 18 volts there. Whoa. Result. Okay. I wonder if we're going to get lucky here. Just turn it off again. Right, here we are set up with the bias. Unfortunately, these new Euro tubes bias probes with LEDs are virtually unreadable. They're very low light even for me to watch, and you almost certainly won't be able to see them at all. So what we've got is a very closely matched pair. It's 33 and 34 milliamps at 404 plate volts. Sounds about right to me. I'm just going to check on a little utility I use called Weber, I think it's called Weber bias calculator. Useful tool, and what you do is you just enter in the valve type, which is a EL34. You put in the plate voltage, which I can read as 405 volts. Calculate bias, it comes at 43 milliamps. So these are running a little bit cool. I don't mind amps running a bit cool, to be honest with you. There is a bias control. I will show you where it is. So bias control is here, quite usefully placed. So we will just give it a little bit of a tweak, and I might bring it up to 37 or something. So it looks like clockwise, quite sensitive, very sensitive. Just giving it a bit of clockwise, and that's now 37 milliamps, which is fine. So I'm happy with the bias on that. Well, phew, I hope you enjoyed that one. I didn't really enjoy working on that. I don't really enjoy working on these Mesa type amplifiers. I like to be able to get to the bits I want to change, and it's very frustrating if you can't do that. And that was a nightmare, wasn't it, trying to get that valve subboard out with those security screws in. What on earth were they thinking of? But anyway, the point of this video is that we got there in the end and the amplifier is repaired. Okay, maybe it wasn't the easiest and simplest and nicest of repairs, but the amp is back in circulation and at a reasonable price. We didn't have to scrap it, for example, which is obviously a real shame. So that's the name of the game I'm in, fixing an amp at a sensible price for the customer. That's really all I care about. Okay, well, hope you enjoyed watching it. Lots of stuff to learn there. I'll see you on the next video with hopefully an easier amp for me to work on.